Alright, Genesis Hecahands Chimera games, game 1. We are up against Branded. Let's see what we can do. We won the die roll here, so we're going first. And this is a pretty solid looking hand. We can start with our Hecahands line, kind of feel our way around, see if they have any hand traps. And then we can go into the much more important Chimera stuff with Chimera Fusion if they don't, which they clearly don't. And because we ripped the Aliber, we know that they're playing Branded, and Branded almost never plays any hand traps, so we don't really have to worry about anything. So we just set up a pretty significant board, go through our lines, everything looks weird, our monsters don't do much, but they're annoying to get through. So this is kind of an interesting one, because that's pretty much the same thing their deck does. I go into Crazy Beast just because I figure I can suck a Branded Lost if need be. They start with Rahu, which immediately gets out the Yawdall. They got some stuff, but Genesys in hand is going to put in a little bit of work because it can suck from their extra deck, and they're going to scoop up game 1. So, you know, like normal, very first game is a bit of a stomp just to show you what we can do. Let's go see a much better one. See, this one's a lot better because they're going first as Branded, which is significantly scarier than Branded going second, especially when they're also playing the Dracotail stuff. We got Genesys in hand, so we yoink their Pan, which means Pan's going to get banished, which means that it can't shuffle back in for extra value, so that's pretty cool, but otherwise the Genesys doesn't actually manage to stick around and give us any bodies. Okay, well that's 3 back rows and an Ice Jade. We'll see what we can do. We've got a pretty good hand. We can go Idtel to summon Gygus to threaten that entire line. Then we can go Hidden Hecahands to search something, which honestly was just bait. And they took the bait, which means we can resolve Mirror Sword Knight, which allows us to do, well, just everything. Resolving Mirror Sword Knight is just about the entire deck, if we're being honest. I go into Chimera here, and they do a weird thing. What the heck was this called? Fusion Duplication? I've never seen that before, but it lets them banish the Branded Fusion to use it to summon Chaos Star Source to try and pop our Chimera. We negate that with the Sword Knight, and I'm really, really stupid, because we have Mutiny in the Sky in the hand. We could have summoned out Loose to have definite lethal, but I'm like, oh no, 31 into Kit, that's gonna do it. We've got 3 attacks, whereas the math clearly doesn't work out, so they're gonna get another turn on Branded, which is really scary. But we get them to 400, we get back Chimera Fusion, we do the Mutiny. I'm kicking myself entirely at this point, but it's okay. We'll make it work. We get rid of the Mirror Jade. I know that's going to pop our board, but we do it anyways. We go into Erisichthian to get rid of some stuff. And we've got follow-up in the grave. We've got like a way to summon back a banished card, which can get us back the Mirror Sword Knight, which we can then use to get a bunch of value, and we can go into Chimera Fusion on their turn. They don't do a whole lot before they go to battle, which means they don't kill us, which means we aren't forced to do anything until they try to end their turn, which allows us to go into our Chimera from extra deck to rip the last card out of their hand, just to hedge our bets for next turn, and we bring back our Chimera, the Illusion Beast. Now, because it wasn't Fusion Summon, we can only attack with it once, and they negate it with the Lulua Lilith, but unfortunately for them, Lulua Lilith's negate is not permanent. So we've got a board. We can contest this. Even though we ended with actual nothing but just the Chimera Fusion on board, we can still contest their board because they didn't do that much. And when we swing it with the Illusion Beast, we can make the Lulua Lilith 0 attack and then get in for game with regular Chimera. So, real big fumble, but like my teammate caught it 10 yards down the field and we won anyways. So who knows? Cool. You know, I got into a lot of control mirrors this week. To be fair, I didn't play that many games, but I like to think the ones I did get were pretty good. Anyways, we are going first into Dogmatika Regenesis, which is a deck that I have thought about playing but haven't gotten around to. I love Dogmatika. Regenesis is okay, but anything that makes Dogmatika better is immediately suspect for me playing it. Here we kind of feel around, see if Jaza gets interacted with, like that whole line in any way. It doesn't, which means the Mirror Sword Knight's probably okay to go, so we do that. Oh, hey, look, they drew and discarded an Abiru, which means that they have another Nibiru. And unfortunately, at the point where we saw that they discarded a Nibiru, we were already at 5 summons. So we just have to set a bunch of stuff and pass and hope it's good enough. But we can bring back Jaza on draw phase, which gives us access to both of our counter traps, which is pretty scary. We can summon out the Godus. It's not gonna matter probably. They won't interact with their grave too terribly much, but you know, it's cool. We use our spell trap negate. We use our monster negate. We still have our spell trap negate because this deck doesn't play a whole ton of spell traps. They try to go to combat and do some stuff. It doesn't work because we have 2 illusions on the field. Cool, fine by me, no complaints. They activate Birth, which is unfortunate that that's the only spell trap they have because it's a very important one and we just get to Yada all Hecahands it. So that lets us go into Xeno. Xeno rips, and this is the funniest thing I've ever seen. They had Chimera in their extra deck. They probably just threw a bunch of slop in there for no particular reason, but they had Chimera in their extra deck, and we hit it with a Xeno. So now we have Chimera on board, which means that these Chimera fusions are live. So we go into Chimera the Illusion Beast because we now have a Chimera name, which means we can attack with that 3 times as well as a 7300 Nibiru Rock, so that's pretty funny. This deck, you're going to see at least one more situation like this that's just really funny, and this deck kind of attracts those situations thanks to specifically the Hecahands cards. They make really funny things happen. Alright, they're going first this time, and you know, for the fact that this is a pretty bricky deck, I wasn't feeling it so much this week. We got a couple of hands that were like Hecahands only. We didn't really get access to the Chimera engine, but in general, we've done a pretty good job of like getting to what we need. Game 2, a little bit mean feeling. They just went Ecclesia, set 2 pass. But they do have the Thunderbolt in hand, so they summon out Thunderbolt, if I can speak. That's something that matters. We have to summon Brius in defense position, unfortunately. Oh god, but they open the Birth, so they can book that. We can dodge the punishment with our fusion, but that means they don't get to send anything from extra deck. Fleur-de-Lis's kind of annoying, though, at 2500, but we can get over it here with the Loose. We can fuse in for the Chimera the Illusion Beast, but unfortunately it can only attack multiple times against monsters, which means we don't have lethal, which means they get back 2 Regenesis cards on end phase, and oh man, this might have just turned into an actual game. Well, on their draw phase, we summon out the Godus, which was an issue. I should have waited until main phase because we could have at least ripped a card, because his effect is only during main phase for some reason. I didn't realize that. So they book it before we get there so we don't get to use his effect, but that's okay. We've still got plenty of stuff we can bring back, and like, they haven't shown an ability to get over illusions in combat, which is necessary to beat us. Like, if they can't get over illusions in combat, they can't beat us regardless of what they do and what resources they get access to and how hard they try. So this is a neat one. They tribute summon Maximus to send Jiracastero and Jirac Meteor, which allows them to set up a Meteor for our turn. Well, unfortunately for them, we get Malong and Garura, which means we now know that the only card in their hand is a monster, in case we get a little handsy with them. But they have a board wipe, and we know it, so we just go into battle, which forces it out, and it's not looking great for them, because sure, our board's clean, but we got 6 cards in hand in Graveyard Follow-Up, and they're looking at 1 with, 1 Regenesis engraved, just the Sage. So it's kind of looking like just a slow path to victory. You see there the Brius just yoinks Maximus because we know they had it, and it's the only card that they had in hand. Ooh, Lava Golem's a nasty one, but they don't draw it, so that's probably going to be it. So we just outgrinded Regenesis when they went first, which is nothing to sneeze at. But of course, we saved the best for last. Okay, and just so you don't accuse me of picking on people, this one is up against Killer Tune, the new hotness that doesn't cost nearly enough points. So they get to play 20 hand traps, which is pretty cool, I guess, for some reason. Our hand's looking pretty good, though, but they Skullmeister Buyo. Okay, that's weird. Well, let's do the Ibtel line, and they Valor the Gygus. Okay, that's annoying, but that should clear the way for our Mirror Sword Knight. Okay, cool. The Baphomet resolves. And they have Delta for the Chimera Fusion. And unfortunately, Chimera Fusion only comes back to hand if we have Chimera on field or in grave. So we can't get it back to try again. So we have to just pass, but they only have 3 cards in hand. What can they do? Well, unfortunately, the answer is just everything. They had 2 starters, they had an extender, like their hand was just kind of perfectly sculpted here. And so we're gonna be in a rough spot, but we do have some follow-up. We've got this Ultimate Slayer, and hey, look, they don't have that much on their board, right? Well, they didn't have that much on their board, as you're about to see. This deck is sort of like Synchro Dracotail. Considering they just got to a Chain Link 7, this is probably not going to go so great for us. So they get Rico, they get some extra deck stuff, we bounce things, but they have Clip, which means that they can go for Red Seal, and Red Seal is just a negate, and we can't fuse into anything, so like, yeah. The reason I scooped that might look a little premature, but we can't use the Mirror Sword Knight to protect. We can't do anything else. We've normal summoned already, and they're... I should have made them do it, I guess, but if they negate the Chimera Fusion, there's literally nothing we can do, and they've got follow-up for days, so that one's pretty over. Okay, well, let's pull it back in the next game. Okay, we're going first again. Hand looks good again. Let's hope they have less interaction, or at least less engine if they still have a ton of interaction. They just kind of had the exact perfect hand. We take the DD Crow because it doesn't put a tuner in their grave, and they get value from having tuners in their graveyard, so like that's the best thing we can do. And you see they've turned to using like Skullmeister and DD Crow because this deck, when played pure, Killer Tune only has like 20 engine pieces they can even use, so they just literally play 20 hand traps on top of that. And they have so many points that they can play a lot of them, but, you know, filling 20 is rough, so they do result in DD Crows and Skullmeisters, which they only had Skullmeister here. Which is good, because that means that we can hand rip, and that puts them down to 4, and we can negate stuff, and here we go, like, just hoping that they don't have the 1 card after all of our interaction, because again, this deck doesn't have a huge amount of interaction. We go Tartarus for Xeno to hopefully rip, like, a relevant extra deck target out, but apparently they just didn't have it, so we take that one back in a pretty dominant display there. Like, they almost fought through it, but we got there, and their deck really doesn't do a whole lot off of 1 card anyways, even if it did resolve. But of course, because we won that last game, that means we're going second in this one, and that's a real rough place to be against Killer Tune, especially with a hand that's fine. Like, it's okay, but it's far from perfect. But we'll see. We'll see how it goes. So we summon the Goddess at first opportunity. There's probably a meta to, like, waiting on Goddess until like a particular target is in the opponent's graveyard. I don't know, I just throw them out there, and then if I see an opportunity to do something relevant, I do it. They're about to pop it, so I just grab Mix, because what else are we gonna do? Start of our turn, we're gonna go Ultimate Slayer. It's not great against them, and they actually do something super smart here. They can't respond with their monsters, with Mix specifically, to the Ultimate Slayer. So they go Cyclone to target the Ultimate Slayer to put a chain link in between it and the mix, or the remix, so that they can use its effect, which is just the smartest thing I've ever seen, and I really want to give my opponent kudos for that one. So Remix is able to activate, which really sucks for us because they're going to get a whole bunch of value again. But it's at the start of our turn. We forced it out with very little interaction and very few cards in our hand. We go to Ghost Ogre, but they unfortunately have the clip, so they can go into Red Seal before we pop it. I guess I could have saved the Ghost Ogre for the Red Seal, and oh no, they hit our big Chimera. That's our way to kill them. That sucks. And they negate the Jaza with a Veiler in hand, but okay, well, they shouldn't have more negates as long as this back row is literal nothing. Gazelle gets us Chimera Fusion, and then we can use the Chimera Fusion, and then they negate the Chimera Fusion. But we have the Poly. Okay, well, it's Killer Toon Synchro. That's not great because that allows them to go into Loudness War, but the Poly resolves, and that means we're going to get a whole bunch of value of our own here. We can add a Mirror Sword Knight, send Buio, add Mutiny, use Mutiny to get an extra normal summon off the Duke so we can normal summon the Mirror Sword Knight so that we can tribute it for Burf, and that's a whole lot of value coming our way. Cool, so Chimera Fusion, go into Guardian Chimera, force out the last piece of interaction they have, which is Loudness War, banishing something from grave, which they've been holding on to, and they really shouldn't have been, because they didn't want to get rid of the resources, I guess, but that's also going to trigger to get us back the Jaza. This forces that out, pops a card. Unfortunately, Red Seal was indestructible at the time because the Loudness War was still on field, but we can set all Hecahands, and we've got Jaza, and they make the single stupidest play any human has ever played right after I gave them so many kudos, because they go to main phase and they go to negate Jaza with Red Seal so they can go to battle and walk over it, but they just saw us set the all Hecahands, which lets us negate it and add it to our field, and hey look, we've got a fully active Red Seal, and hey look, we have a Ghost Ogre and Malong, which means we've now gotten Omni Negate. Cool. Well, they add Synchro Overtake, and then we go ahead and negate that, hoping they don't have another starter. But they have Q. That's tragic. How tragic could it possibly be? Well, unfortunately for them, our Red Seal is modulating their levels, which means they can't Synchro Summon, and they just scoop it up. Funniest thing I've ever seen. But it was still a very good game. So, you know, well played, all that good stuff. And that's going to do it for our games this week. I hope you guys liked them, and I hope to see you next time. Bye-bye.